Hello, everybody. This is Bob Kingpin Harris with another edition of Bernie's Baseball World. And I'm going to bring in the man right now. There he is with me. Joining me on the screen is Bernie Pleskoff. Bernie, how are you?
Hey, good morning, Bob. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. And it's been a good week and in a bad week in a few different ways. A good week because we're another week closer
Right.
to another week closer to another baseball season, and a bad week because we lost a friend of ours, and I'm going to put his picture up here on the screen for everybody. And as you talk about Tom Singer.
Bob, we lost Tom Singer this week, and we would be remiss if we did not share the fact that Tom was a wonderful baseball writer, a dear friend, a part of our hot stove group where you and I will be together for lunch today with a group of baseball people from the Phoenix area. Tom was a member of that. Tom was very witty, very clever, had these awful puns, a terrific writer, and we're going to miss Tom Singer. So, our condolences to his family, to all his friends who are mourning today the loss of a terrific friend, a very, very respectful man, a man who just had a terrific career, came from Hungary, settled in Pittsburgh, loved his Pittsburgh Pirates. And you know, when I would visit in spring training the last couple of years in Bradenton, the minute they finished the rehabilitation, Tom was so proud of the fact that it was a new field there. Everything was different, and he took me for a walk out by the new boardwalk area in Pirate Town. He was just he was a Pittsburgh Pirates fan forever, and we're going to miss Tom Singer. And I just wanted to start the show today by letting Tom know how much we'll miss him.
Yeah, and a great guy. And unfortunately, I didn't get to know him as long as you knew him, and our friend Barry Bloom, who knew him for many many years. Uh, I only knew him a few times, but and as I wrote to Barry this week after he wrote about his stories, and uh, I think we have to tell the story though about them creating a fake trade or rumor. So I thought that was pretty funny when I saw that. But Tom always made me feel like I knew him for a long time. And unfortunately, now that you mentioned that he was Hungarian, I happen to have Hungarian in my background too.
As do I.
You know, so it would have been interesting, but he was a funny guy. Uh, as you
Tell the
said,
story, Bob, about how they developed the trade.
well, I have to tell this story because it's really funny. I guess they were sitting on a bench in, I think it was Nashville, because I think they said it was the Grand Ole Opry that they were at one of these baseball winter meetings. You know, this is where all the trades go down
Right.
and everything else, and all the general managers get together and presidents and so forth. And Barry Bloom, our friend from MLB.com, and Tom had sat down and they said, you know what? Why don't we create a trade?
Yeah,
Why don't
we
we
did it.
yeah
Yeah.
why don't we create a rumor? And it's like okay, and they'll say what was it, Pedro? Which one was
I
that?
think it was Pedro Alvarez going to the Yankees.
Yeah, Pedro Alvarez. I guess the Yankees needed a third baseman or whatever, something like that. And they said, well, let's go our separate ways and let's start chatting up this rumor. And I guess, long story short, later in the day, Brian Cashman was being interviewed on Yes Network, and somebody brought up the fact that so what is this trade or this rumor we're hearing about Pedro Alvarez coming to the Yankees? And they go, I've never talked to Pittsburgh. So it was pretty funny. In baseball, we see the rumors and we hear the rumors every day of what might happen, and we'll talk a little bit about that later because I do want to mention a Diamondbacks one that I've been kicking around for, and I hate to say this, but I've been kicking around that rumor for. Mid last year that I thought Aaron Hill was going to be gone mid season last year. And
Yeah.
finally, Aaron Hill is not there, and we will talk about that trade. Um, we had hoped to have Ginger Paulson on with us today as our guest to talk about that trade. Unfortunately, I have to say, with technical difficulties, I couldn't get her on today. So I apologize to you, Bernie, for not having Ginger on today, but we'll get that corrected soon, folks.
Well, that's and Ginger was going to break down that Milwaukee and Arizona trade. Ginger lives in Wisconsin, and I believe she's a graduate of here in Arizona of the Walter Cronkite School, and I met her probably during the fall league. And Ginger was going to come on today, but we'll have her on next week, and we'll talk about that deal from her perspective. Bob, if you don't mind, can you share a little bit about your background? And I know we shared last week that you are a professional bowler. How did you ever get interested in broadcasting?
Well, I'll tell you how I got interested in broadcasting. You know me, I'm a fairly aggressive guy. Yes, I've been a professional bowler for 30 years, and I used to bowl a lot more than I do right now. But I can still kick some butt. The thing is, how I got into broadcasting a year after I became a professional bowler, I said, you know what? I also love broadcasting, and why don't I start a bowling show? And this was radio. I mean, I wasn't thinking TV back then. But why don't I start a show on bowling? And knowing me as you know you, Bernie, I started calling around to many different radio stations in the Chicagoland area and floating the idea past them. I went out and I was aggressive about it until I finally found that one radio station that was based out of the border of Indiana, but had enough power to broadcast back all through the Chicagoland area. And I started a show on bowling. Actually did that for the first 9 or so years of doing broadcasting. And now I've been in broadcasting about 29 years. And they said, yeah, we love that idea. That's great. You know, right then it was a brokered station. What does a brokered station mean? Well, it means that you pay for the airtime. Well, after a few weeks, the guy says, you know what? We like the show so much, you don't have to pay for airtime.
Wow, great.
So it was like, okay, cool. And so had the opportunity. It was called Bold Talk. I did that with a friend of mine, and people from Chicago will definitely know the name of Heinemann's Bakeries, and his name is Dennis Dorner. He was my partner on the show, and we did this show on bowling called Bold Talk, and of course I named it BOW, capital WLD. I'm sorry, I take that back. Capital B, capital O, small w, capital L, capital D, talk. We got to talk about the PBA, what was good about it, what was bad about it, and what the Professional Bowlers Association actually did. Just to give you an idea, Bernie, is every week, remember it used to be on in Chicagoland from 2:30 to 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was predictable, right? We knew what time it was going to be on. And what the PBA would do for me is the minute that the winner, and that was a live show, right? That wasn't taped or anything. It was live. About 5 minutes after the event got off Channel 7 in Chicago or ABC across the nation, they actually had the winner call our show.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
That was part of it. You had to talk to Bob. And so that's how I started out. We'll fast forward that. I wound up doing other radio, not just sports, but sports, of course, is my love. And then about 5 years ago, I started, and probably the first person to do it is internet TV, like you see today. So this is something I had to learn all this stuff, try to figure all this stuff out. So everything you see here, I'm working the magic behind the keyboard over here, and that's on the pictures in which you're seeing, Bernie. But
thank you, Bob.
And we're going to take it a step farther. There's going to be lots of exciting news because I have a year plan right now. It wasn't a 2-year plan, but I do have a year plan now to go a 24-hour live sports TV via the internet, and that is going to happen. So,
Good for you.
with that, but I am so thrilled to be on this show with you. Last week was our first week. We had a number of hits. We looked to grow our audience, and I think the show was great. We're talking about prospects. You're the man to do that, and you're the guy who has all the knowledge in the world to do that.
I
Well, listen,
wish.
well, you are. Listen, how can there be? Is there another show out there that actually has a scout, a former scout, actually talking about prospects?
Well, I'll tell you about this. Very kind of you, and we will talk about prospects on this show, no doubt about it. And we're going to do it from a perspective of what this prospect means to the club and what it can mean for your fantasy team. And I got an opportunity to work with the guy that I think is the best prospect guy in the country and the world, and that's Jim Callis. And when
Yep.
you're around Jim Callis at all, you realize how much you don't know. And hats off to Jim Callis, who for me is just a wealth of knowledge. He's got like a photographic memory. So I don't always remember everything, and I'm getting up in years there, but I hope to be sharing some opinions with the people who watch this, and maybe it'll help you in your fantasy league or to look for a certain guy when you go out to the park. Let's talk today about some American League guys, Bob.
Yep. Yeah. Let's start it off. And our first guy that we have on the list, and I always. It's hard for me to believe that Houston is still in the American League, but with all the
Yeah.
years that they were in the National League. But A.J. Reed of the Houston Astros.
AJ Reed is a left-handed hitter. They've got a guy there now that Singleton is their first baseman. Let's call it like it is. He is going to start the season as their first baseman, probably. But I think AJ Reed, a left-handed hitter, and look, this guy is 6'4", 240 pounds. Last season alone, he hit 34 home runs
Wow.
at two levels. He played at Class A Advanced and Double A. Now that's not Major League pitching, but anytime he drove in 127 runs. I've gotten to see him several times. He has a big uppercut swing, a lot of loft in the ball, a lot of strikeout in there, a lot of swing and miss in there. But I'll tell you, that fits with the Astros. They live with swings and misses. Chris Carter is now gone, and maybe A.J. Reed takes over at first base. My prediction is he gets there sooner than later because he is that, he's an impact bat. And just to add another bat to the Astros lineup, it lengthens their lineup. He hit 363 against right-handed pitching and only 271, which is pretty good against lefties. So I think you're going to see A.J. Reed take over at first base at some point this season. I don't know if it's April, May, June, July, whenever it is, he will be their first baseman of the future. He's a guy you want to pick up in your fantasy league.
Now, a team that I get to see quite a bit because I do travel out to the Bay Area quite a bit is the Oakland Athletics and Matt Olson.
There's another big left-handed hitter, 6'5", 230 pounds. I'm not sure he makes the club until late in the season. But if Oakland scuffles to score runs and they want to add some power to their lineup, Matt Olson's a guy who can hit right-handed pitching. He scuffles against lefties. He is a 55 in my estimation, scouting grade 55, which means for me, eventually, upside, he's their everyday first baseman. Not quite ready yet. He's 21 years old. And when I saw Matt Olson, I saw a nice swing, not as much uppercut, a much more level swing, but he does get loft on the ball. Look for this guy to add power to the Athletics lineup at some point this year. I think he's draftable for fantasy, but you have to be patient. Oakland has a tendency to move a lot of players. And because of that movement, I think they'll start Olson's clock sooner than later if they want that kind of offense. I think you can look for, Matt Olson to be an impact player for Oakland going forward.
And Lewis Brinson of the Texas Rangers.
Lewis Brinson, Bob, reminds me of, you remember seeing Chris Young here in Phoenix.
Yes.
And you saw those long legs, the loping strides in the outfield, the very good defense. He got better and better at defense. The guy has sneaky power. That's the type of guy that Lewis Brinson is. He's faster than Chris Young. He's a better outfielder right now than Chris Young was, but he's got this sneaky power, this doubles power from the right side of the plate. Texas is going to have to give this guy a look in center field because he just has that ability to bring some magic. The spark that you need. That's what I see in him. Last year, he had 304 against right-handed pitching. He's a right-handed hitter. He's 21 years old, and his two greatest tools are speed and power. He's got a good hit tool as well. I look for Lewis Brinson later in the year to come up and sneak some at-bats in at center field.
And the Minnesota Twins have a prospect that you've had your eye on. That's Jose Berrios.
Jose Berrios, right-handed pitcher for the Minnesota Twins. The Twins pitching staff is not that good, to be very honest with you. And I think Berrios is going to help them. He's not very big. He's 6 feet tall. He's 185 pounds. A right-handed pitcher, but listen to his numbers last year. He went 14-5. He had a 2.87 ERA, and he had a 1.04 WHIP. Now, that's at two levels, AA and AAA. I think this guy is going to be a winning pitcher in Minnesota. He's going to have that big ballpark. He's going to slot in the rotation probably as a 2 or a 3 eventually. I think he's going to be there sooner than later. He's got a good fastball. Let me see if I've got the speed on his fastball.
Sure.
91-96. And he also throws a curveball and changeup. So he's got 3 serviceable pitches, but it's his fastball that has that change in velocity from 91-96, gets some sink on the ball. I like Jose Berrios. I think it could be a rocky start, but after he gets going, and I think it'll be pretty soon, maybe July or even sooner if they scuffle, he's another keeper.
Okay. Baltimore. Dylan Bundy.
Bob, I don't know what to make of it.
He makes you chuckle, huh?
Yeah, he does. I feel badly because Dylan Bundy can't stay healthy. He pitched, I think I saw him in 2 games in the fall league, in an inning in each game. He's a big, big righty, big guy because he's 6'1" and 200 pounds, but he's got a big arm. And I guess when I say big, that's what I mean. If he's healthy, he's like 95 miles an hour, 91-97 with his fastball. He's got a good curveball. So he's got a fastball curveball combination, also throws a changeup. But he's coming back from injury. He may pitch out of the bullpen. I think if I'm looking at the Orioles, I'm not looking at him as a starting pitcher right away. I think they're adding to their rotation, and they're looking now to add more depth. But Bundy probably will be there if he stays healthy. I think he's going to pitch out of the bullpen. So people look for him to make the club, but maybe not. The star is not as bright as it once was. This is a big year for Dylan Bundy. If he stays healthy, he's got to show he can command his fastball. If he does that, I think he'll be okay. Have you seen him, Bob, at all?
No, I've never seen Dylan Bundy.
Yeah, okay, but you've heard about him.
I've heard about him.
Right.
I read your articles.
Okay, it's not just mine. A lot of people think he's a top prospect.
Yeah, I know, but I figure I just go to the best, so I go to you, Bernie. Next guy on our list is Gary Sanchez of the Yankees.
Gary Sanchez had a tremendous Arizona Fall League. He opened my eyes, not so much for his offense, which I always thought was there, but he looks like a very good catcher to me now, where he was marginal. And, that's why I think you have to be patient with catchers. His blocking is better than it was. He's got a very good arm. I think he's calling a game better. The pitchers I talked to had confidence in Sanchez, and man, did he hit. I think he's going to be a nice power hitter for the New York Yankees if he gets to play. I think he's going to make the club out of spring training. He threw out 33% of guys trying to steal in his career, which isn't bad. His two biggest tools are his power and his ability to hit for average. So if you're looking for a fantasy guy at catcher, I think you'll be okay with Gary Sanchez. 274 hitter last year at AA and AAA. He hit 18 home runs, drove in 62. New York is kind of a hitter-friendly park, more so for lefties than right-handed hitters. He's right-handed. 6'2", 230 pounds. So look for Gary Sanchez, I think, to break with the club, get his chance behind McCann. You know, he's not going to beat out McCann behind the plate. And he may not make the club out of spring, but if I'm looking at him, I say, I want this guy at the plate. He can knock in some runs. But they may want him to further develop catching. They may not want his clock to start till July. So keep your eye on Gary Sanchez. But I think he is a big part of the Yankees' future.
I have to ask you a question because I've always
Sure.
thought of it this way. Why do certain teams always draft well at a certain position?
Yeah.
Because I grew up, of course, being a Cubs fan, and it always seemed like they always had a decent team that they put out on the field, but their pitching really wasn't very good, and I didn't think they ever drafted very well. A team like the Yankees have always seemed to draft very well in a catching position, and maybe more positions than
Right,
that.
right.
But can you answer that at all?
Well, let me say this about the Yankees. The catchers they have brought up, I think of Jesus Montero and now Sanchez, etc. And there have been others. They can hit. Their catchers, Jorge Posada could hit. I mean, he was a terrific hitter, not just at the beginning, but towards the heart of his career, terrific hitting catcher. And they didn't look at defense as much as they looked at offense behind the plate. And then you could, Murphy, who just went to the Twins, was a good hitting Yankees catcher. So they've got they placed a lot of emphasis on the offensive part of their catching. Now, why is that? Because there's somebody in the organization who knows what he's looking for in catching. There's somebody in the organization in Atlanta for years. They had terrific pitching, and they emphasized this. They looked for this way. The Dodgers looked for pitchers or players who fit the Dodger mold. And you go out there and you bird dog from high school. You watch these kids. You stay on them. You build a relationship with them. And then you try to follow them from high school and maybe sign them out of high school or through college. But you have to have that draft position to do it as well. So if you have an emphasis on left-handed pitching in your organization, or let's say 6'3" and over for your pitchers, that's what you look for. And you hone in on it and you don't settle until you find your guys.
Okay, next guy up on our list is Blake Snell of the Tampa Bay Rays.
I don't hear enough buzz about Blake Snell, quite frankly. I think he's going to be a very good left-handed pitcher for the Tampa Bay Rays. The problem is that Blake Snell is on a pitching roster that's very deep. So for him to get into that rotation, it's going to take a poor performance or an injury. And I just think the guy, as a lefty at 6'4", 180 pounds, tall and thin, 23 years old, last year, Class A advanced, AA and AAA, over 3 classifications. He threw 134 innings and he went 15-4, Bob. He had a 1.02 WHIP and a 1.41 ERA. That's some pitching.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's very possible that this guy could sneak into the Tampa Bay rotation. Right-handed hitters hit only 200 against him, and lefties hit 137. So that's some pitching. Pretty sneaky guy. Let me look at his. I don't have his velocity. Oh yeah, his fastball's at 88 to 94. Tremendous range. A slider, a changeup, and he's working on his curveball. He gets a lot of sink on the ball. I really like Blake Snell, and I don't think he gets the credit when we think of, pitching prospects that some other guys do.
Okay. Last prospect on our list, but definitely not the end of the show, is Tim Anderson of the Chicago White Sox.
I think the guy is their shortstop of the future as soon as this year. If they want offense out of the shortstop position, I think they're going to turn to Tim Anderson in the second half. He's just waiting to break out. He's got a terrific hit tool. I've seen him play a lot, and I like what I see. He's lithe, he's agile, not the greatest defender. He's going to grow into being better. He's a good defensive shortstop, but he's got a bat, he's got speed, he's smooth. This is their shortstop of the future. I've got him, Bob, as like a 65, which is probably I've got him at a 60 to grow into a 65. He's 6'1", he's 185 pounds, he's 22 years old. I like him a lot. I think you're going to see, last year he hit 312, 5 home runs, 46 RBIs, but he stole 49 bases. So I think you're going to see Tim Anderson as the White Sox shortstop maybe as soon as the second half of this season.
Wow. Okay. Hey, before we talk about the trade that the Diamondbacks just made by sending Aaron Hill over to the Brewers, let's talk a little bit about how people can get involved with the show. Why don't we do that now? I'm going to put that slide up. And, how folks can, if they want to sponsor the show or if they want to just get their name on the show or even if they want to send you questions, Bernie, I'm going to put that slide up right now.
Okay. That's good. We want people that are watching the show to interact with us. You can do it on Twitter. You can do it on, I do read my Facebook, not as often. Or you could buy one of those the greetings that we have. You can call that number that you'll see. And I don't see that screen, but
and I'll tell you the number right now, which is area code 480-436-1620, and I'll repeat that: 480-436-1620, 1620. Okay. Now we have let's talk about the trade. Let's talk about the trade that the Diamondbacks just made. Of course, they've been the team making a lot of noise this offseason.
Yeah, and they just signed Tyler Clippard for the bullpen. And I want to talk about that first before the trade because that's their latest transaction. And I want to tell you that I have some reservations about that. I like Tyler Clippard as a pitcher. Don't get me wrong. I'm very concerned that we have a little bit of Addison Reed and Tyler Clippard. He's a fly ball pitcher historically. And a fly ball pitcher in Chase Field gives me a little bit of concern.
Yep.
I think he can overcome it. I think he can get some sink on the ball. But when that ball rises, or if he makes a mistake, when he gets hit, it's going to fly out of the park. I'm a little bit concerned about that. I don't want to overdo it because I want to give him a chance to come here and throw out of the bullpen. I don't think, ideally he could be the closer. I don't think that's going to happen right away. I think he'll be the setup guy. But eventually I think he's going to settle in. My only caution right now, Bob, is the fly balls in Chase Field.
Yeah.
You really have to be very careful. You've seen it over and over again.
Balls fly out of that park as much as they do in Philadelphia.
Yeah, all you have to do is hit a line drive and it's gone.
Right.
You don't even have to have loft in your swing. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, and I just wanted to mention that. But give the Diamondbacks credit because they are trying to win it all now. And they just picked up a new shortstop, and let's talk about it.
Yep, let's talk about that one. That trade with the Milwaukee Brewers, and you know what? I have a question before we hop in and talk about that because I am interviewing Derek Hall next Friday, and one of my questions, and I just went through the attendance, and sorry to bring it up on this show, but it is a prospect show, yeah, but we do talk baseball, right? I've taken a look at the Diamondbacks. Actually started out in 1998, I believe, was their first year. They drew, of course, in the first year their highest attendance numbers ever of 3,600,000. They have now gone down in the last 6 to 7 years. They have been averaging about 2 million, and it's actually gone down or held steady over these last 5 years. And one of my questions for Derek Hall next week, and I'll run this one right past you, Bernie, right now, is how much is the correlation between the numbers of fans coming in being stagnant to winning now correlate?
Well, I think you're going to find that in any city. If you win, they will show up.
Except
If you
Chicago,
don't win, they're not going to show up. But as my friend Bobby Knopp always tells me, Bobby Knopp was one of the finest middle infielders I ever saw play years ago for the White Sox, the Angels. He is now an infield instructor for the Angels. Bobby always reminds me that it's very difficult to sell tickets here in the summer. A lot of people are gone. A lot of people don't even go out in the summer in June, July, and August
right.
because it's hot here. It's a tough ticket to sell. You've got to win here. So I get that.
And what they're trying to do is win now. And let's talk about that trade with Milwaukee, and talk a little bit about your thoughts of this one.
Well, let's talk first of all about Gene Segura, the shortstop.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, he had a terrific year. Everything worked: defense, offense, stolen bases. He has kind of scuffled a little bit since then. Isn't the same guy. He had a loss of a child in there. It was a very tough time for him. I think he's got some comeback in him. I think he wants to prove that he is the Gene Segura that came over from the Angels to Milwaukee and now is coming to Arizona. The problem I have with this is that the Diamondbacks have so many middle infielders. Nick Ahmed is a terrific defender. They already traded Didi Gregorius. They've got Chris Owings at second base. I don't know how they're going to mix and match Owings, Ahmed, and now Segura in the middle infield. So they know that. They've got it figured out. My hunch is by the end of the year, you're going to see Ahmed at shortstop and Segura at second, unless they trade Ahmed or Owings.
Right. Right. I agree with you there. I think someone's going to have to go, and this might be a place where Segura actually restarts that. And I can't say restarts his career, but really launches it, because you know what, he's on there now with this is a pretty good Diamondbacks team.
It is. But one thing I want to mention about this trade is Isan Diaz. This is the young man that the Diamondbacks traded to the Brewers, another middle infielder who I think he's a shortstop. I think he's an everyday shortstop, and I think eventually he is going to be a Brewer that is going to make an impact there. He's still young. He is 19 years old. So if you've got a guy like Isan Diaz in the Diamondback system, he's going to be waiting a long time with all those middle infielders. So they moved him. But they moved him for another shortstop, and I don't think it was a particular position of need. I think they needed more help in the bullpen. That's why they got Clippard. I think they could use probably another, a little bit more depth on the bench, another catcher. But who knows? I think they need pitching, especially in the bullpen. But now they've got that, they've got Gene Segura, and if he can run, that'll help a lot.
Okay. Well,
One more thing I want to say about
Sure.
that deal.
Sure.
Aaron Hill went over to Milwaukee, and
Yep.
Ginger's going to break it down next week in depth, much more than I am here. But Aaron Hill is going to be important to Milwaukee for two reasons. One, they don't have a lot of depth at third base, and he can play third base. Two, actually, there are three reasons. Two is he is a veteran player on a young team that is developing. And because he is a veteran player, he can bring some depth, some experience to those young infielders and to the position players. So he could be a clubhouse leader. The third thing about this deal that I see is that every time I saw him in Phoenix, he was a dead pull hitter to the left field foul line. If he can do that in Milwaukee with that short porch there, he will add some power to the Brewers lineup. He did it when he was sharp in Phoenix. In essence, I don't think he's done yet. I think he's got a little bit more time left, and he can bring some good qualities to the Brewers. And the Diamondbacks rid themselves of the salary, and they used it to help themselves get Clipper. And, of course, they're going to have to be paying off Greinke. So your question about the attendance, Bob, is a good one. And I think I'd like to hear what Derek Hall has to say in your interview.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We have Derek coming up next week, but that's a completely different show. Any final thoughts today, Bernie?
Well, Bob, I will be taking off for Florida in a couple of weeks. I will be based in Orlando for 10 days. So I'm going to see the Tigers. I'll see Atlanta. I'll see Houston. I'll see Washington. I'll see the Mets. I'll see 5 or 6 clubs in Florida. Then I'll be back here around the 11th or so of April, and of March, and I'll catch all of the Phoenix-based teams through the month of March, and then we'll start the season. So it's getting closer. Pitchers and catchers report Wednesday of next week. The trucks have left. They're full. They're going to be unloading on Monday next week at a lot of parks. You and I will be talking baseball later today at our Phoenix-based Hot Stove League luncheon. So there's a lot to look forward to.
And besides that lunch, you are taking your laptop on the road, correct?
I certainly am.
So we will have a show with you again next week from the road. And it'll be kind of interesting to see what's happening down there in Florida.
Well, I'll still be here next week.
Oh, next week you're still there. Okay.
Yeah, I don't leave until early March.
Oh, okay. All right. So when you go down to Florida, you'll be.
I'll have it with me.
Okay. All right. And as everybody knows, we do tape this show live. And anything else you want me to put that final screen up? You want to talk again about how folks can?
Well, they can reach us at that phone number. They can buy time, or they can buy a greeting. You could wish somebody a happy anniversary, a happy birthday, a belated Valentine's Day message. We'll try it. We'll see if it works. So far, we don't know. But the important thing is that you tell your friends that we're on every week. During the month of February and during the month of March, we will be with you. We'll be talking guys for your fantasy team starting next week. I'm also going to break down what I look for in players so you can look for that when you're out at the ballpark, how we grade players from 20 to 80. We'll talk about that next week.
All right. Well, great. I look forward to that show, as I look forward to every week. And hopefully next week we can add a guest as well with us, and we'll take it from there. But Bernie, thanks so much as always, and to everybody, Bernie, I'm going to play this music. You just stick around with me.
You bet, and you can watch us on YouTube like you did last week. And if everybody brings one more viewer, we'll get it rolling.
That's right. That's what we need. Let's talk it up out there. This is Bob Kingpin Harris for Bernie Pleskoff. Take care, everybody.